Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeff Malinoff. With me, as always, is Mark Souza. The football season in the NFL may be over, but not the football season entirely is over, because the Alliance of American Football starts tomorrow, February 9th, on CBS. So we're going to talk about that and say maybe there's fantasy football you can look into.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, you know why? Because there's a lot of degenerates like us who are addicted to fantasy football. So, hey.
I'm not a degenerate.
Yeah, you are, my friend.
Why am I a degenerate?
Because you're addicted to fantasy football and video games.
No. Well, I mean, I love both those things. Don't get me wrong, but
how many hours of video games do you play a week? On average.
A week?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I usually just play it after dinner.
Mm-hmm.
So
Until when? Till 5 in the morning?
Like usually 11 noon, midnight, because I have work in the morning.
All right.
I would say about 12.
Anyway, so all the rest of fantasy football degenerates like myself, maybe you're removing yourself from this conversation, but you do host a fantasy football podcast.
I just don't like to be called a degenerate, thank you.
All right, fantasy football enthusiasts.
Sue you for defamation.
You can try. You better lawyer up.
Well, I'm Jewish, so I have some connections.
What does that mean?
Do
you have access to lawyers?
Yes, actually, I do.
More so than somebody who is non-Jewish would?
Depends.
Mm-hmm. All right. I agree. If I agree, does that make me racist?
What? Jewish?
You said it, so I disagreed. If I agree with it...
Being Jewish is not a race.
All right. A xenophobe?
Is that the word? I would just say we're, like, just anti-Semitic, but okay.
It's the same thing.
Okay. Okay, we're getting really off topic here.
Yeah, I've been trying to push you back onto the course, but you keep deviating. So
I crashed already, apparently.
So back to the
Mario Kart.
AAF of America.
Alliance of American Football.
Of America.
There's not even league in the title, which is odd, because usually you see the word league in there.
So it debuts this weekend, man. Tomorrow, CBS carrying the premiere of the Alliance of American Football. And, of course, there is fantasy football. Do you know Fantasy Pros actually has a cheat sheet amongst other sites? Pro Football Focus. I'm sure you're aware of Pro Football Focus and Fantasy Pros, two popular sites where fantasy football fans go and get their information, recommendations and how to build your rosters and all that. But they now are also covering the AAF. Jeff, are you going to be playing AAF? Be honest.
If there is a league and someone's if there's money involved, sure, why not?
Yeah, if there's money involved, it changes everything, right?
Absolutely.
See, you're a degenerate, just like me.
Okay, fine, whatever.
All right. I'm just glad that you said it, all right? Anyways.
What were we talking about?
We got to talk about this league for the fans out there that don't know anything about it. So if they want to start playing AAF fantasy, I don't know. Do they have daily fantasy on? I didn't see it on DraftKings. Is it on FanDuel maybe?
I didn't see it on FanDuel, no. But I think it's like I think you could do some leagues like a real league, not daily fantasy.
Yeah. So you might. You know what? Back in the day, and this was back even before my day, so no jokes. All right. But they used to do fantasy leagues offline. That's how it started. Isn't that
What's
nuts?
offline?
I know, right? Before the internet, it was a dark place.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. People called each other on the phone.
What's a phone?
And the phone, get this, man, was connected to a wall. And it stayed at one
What
spot.
are you talking about?
Yeah. No joke. No joke.
Weirdo. Like, I don't
They
think...
used to keep score based on the newspaper putting out the statistics.
What the hell's a newspaper?
Exactly. People used to read.
What are you... none of these words make sense to me.
Imagine every morning you woke up and you went and got the newspaper that was in front of your door.
What's it? Explain to me what a newspaper is.
It's a information that's printed and given and put on in front of your door, so when you wake up, you have the information you need to go about your life.
It's printed on like a tablet?
Like on paper.
The hell is paper?
Right?
All I know is it was a fake thing from Dunder Mifflin Paper Company back in the Office show. That's all I know about it. I've never even seen paper before.
Yep. So anyways, you would play if there's money involved. Jeff, what are the 8 teams in the AAF so we know?
AAF. Get it? Have some
AAF,
respect.
right?
You said the AAF.
Well, I said the AAF. Isn't that what it's called?
Yes.
So what's the problem here?
You said AF. That's what I'm saying.
No, I said AAF.
No.
Sorry, you say AA back together. It's not. I'm not going to say AAF. It's AAF.
Nah.
Figure it out.
Okay, anyways.
We need to know the 8 teams because we need to know when it's your turn to pick, you can sound semi-smart and be like, oh, I'm taking the running back on the Birmingham Iron.
No, yeah, that is one of the teams. But here are the other team names. Number 1, the Arizona Hotshots.
Woohoo.
Which used to be my old basketball team back in AAU days.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a connection with this team. This team might be like my...
Might be your team.
Yeah, because there's not a team in my town, so...
All right, go ahead, next.
Do you want to hear their color scheme, or do you not care?
No.
Okay. We have the Atlanta Legends. Probably my favorite name out of all of them. That's a sweet name for a team. The Legends.
All right.
Obviously, there's anything but legends on this team because it's a developmental league in theory.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Birmingham Iron.
Okay.
Which I dig know
The
as
iron, right? Not the irons.
No, you don't need that. You don't need an S there.
Nice.
We have the Memphis Express.
Keep going.
Orlando Apollos. I love that one. The Salt Lake City Stallions. The San Diego Fleet. And the San Antonio Commanders.
Okay. So those are your teams. I do have a list of players who might be the most notable players in the league. Trent Richardson, former running back in the NFL.
Number 3 overall pick.
Cleveland and Colts.
Was he number 3 or number 2?
I think 3. Did he play for somebody else other than the Colts and the Browns?
He played in Canada.
Zach Stacy, who recently played on the Rams. Akeem Hunt, who played with the Chiefs, with Kareem Hunt, which was always
That's why I remember that name, because I was like, there's something confusing about this.
Denard Robinson,
Former
shoelace
from
Michigan. How about Matt Asiata? He was a backup running back in Minnesota. He started a few people had him on fantasy rosters for sure.
One of the most interesting ones to me is Christian Hackenberg at a Penn State.
I do remember him. New York Jets backup.
And I remember Chet Pennington announcing they drafted him on draft day.
Zach Mettenberger also in the league.
Mettenberger? Usenbaga. It sounds like that.
No relation to Ben Roethlisberger.
Have you seen the movie? I'm assuming you've seen Rookie of the Year.
Dude, one of the best movies ever.
Yeah. Remember when the manager goes like
Rosenberger.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it sounds like.
Warm up. You're going in.
There's one that he goes like Uzenbaga. That's what it sounds like.
He says
to me.
Gardenhose.
Yeah, that's where I think about that name. That reminds me of that.
And his name was Henry Rowan-Gardner.
Oh, you're at him. I thought you were talking about the manager because I cannot tell you the name of the manager.
Oh, man. The pitching coach was pretty funny in that movie. Daniel Stern, the actor
Oh
from
my God,
Home Alone.
I adore him, dude.
Mm-hmm.
He is my favorite person.
So, Josh Huff, former NFL receiver. He's a wide receiver in this league. He might be the most notable one. But, yeah, we might see some fantasy leagues pop up, and I will probably be semi-interested in playing. Depends on how interesting it goes. So I will watch the games this weekend and see what it's like. It's supposed to be, it's probably going to look a lot like preseason NFL, if I had to guess. There's probably there's some players that can make rosters out there, but backups, second and third string types.
Makes sense.
Anyways, I think we should move on.
My one, I'm going to assume, like, if I had to see a first overall pick in an AAF league, I would definitely say Trent Richardson would be probably up there as one of the number one picks, just as recognizable names.
Yeah, he's apparently the number one player in this league in terms of fantasy value.
Actually, I have something else in mind because there is on FantasyPros.com.
Mm-hmm.
They have a guy named by the name Jarrell Presley.
Uh-huh.
And this is what the guy says. He's from the Arizona Hotshots.
I've heard of this guy.
But I can assure you, just like in fantasy leagues, you're looking for a workhorse running back, and he fits the bill. Presley fits the bill.
Yes.
He had an excellent he had a 440.
A 4.4?
Yeah. A 4.40 speed.
Nice.
And
he had 6.9 yards per carry.
He also is on the Hotshots, who are favored to win the championship this season.
Interesting.
So he on Fantasy Pros is actually above Trent Richardson, who's number 2.
Mm-hmm.
And number 3 is actually a wide receiver by Fabian
Guerra.
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce the name.
Fabian Guerra.
Yeah. And apparently there's almost guaranteed that he's ending up on the Patriots roster next season.
Mm-hmm.
So
interesting. All right.
He was on an Arena League he was shredding it in Arena League football as a rookie. He had 14 touchdowns. But of course, it is only a 50-yard field, so.
I think we'll see this being picked up in daily fantasy. I'm not sure. I checked DraftKings; they don't have it. Mm-hmm. So as of yet, nothing.
But do you want to know who the first quarterback is?
Yes.
Dustin Vaughn.
No idea.
Yeah, I don't know who that is either. I'll read up on him. Well, the only reason you would draft a quarterback in the first round in this situation is because the rules are different, and you only got 8 starting quarterbacks to choose between.
Mm-hmm.
And in the report, he has the best receiving core in the league, supposedly, as of right now.
It's all hearsay. The one thing that sucks about this is there's no depth charts.
And a lot of these names, you're like, I've never heard of them.
Right.
So you really are going by complete guessing, except for 2 or 3.
I think we should go to a break, and when we come back, I think we should talk about NFL fantasy football, and in particular, one thing I really want to talk about is Nick Foles. Let's talk about the possible destinations where Nick Foles might quarterback this year, and I think we'll rank them and talk about each one. Where we'd like to see him go, maybe where we wouldn't like to see him go in terms of his fantasy value, because I think we both can agree that Nick Foles is a pretty interesting quarterback going into next season. He offers some value as a veteran. He'll be an intriguing player that I think it'll be hard to tell where people pick him next year. I think there will be a lot of hype, but yeah, we can do that when we return.
Yes, but first I want to talk to you about investing, because when investing and planning for your retirement, it's always best to get the advice from the experts. Best-selling author Harry Dent, America's #1 economist, says the dark window is open. There's an opportunity to rapidly boost your retirement savings for the greatest stock market crash in American history. But the stock window won't be open for long. You can make up to 10 times the annual average stock market gain in just a few short months. Find out more by going to www.harrydentforecast.com. There's a very short time to take advantage of this dark window opportunity. So once again, go to www.harrydentforecast.com to learn more.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just talked about the Alliance of American Football Fantasy League potential that they have. And now we're moving on to the NFL. Back to reality. Hope that goes gravity. And we're talking about Nick Foles here.
Yeah, so recently Nick Foles decided, so the Eagles picked up his option, but then Nick Foles had a veto clause basically in his contract where he could pay out $2 million and void that option, become a free agent. So now it sounds like the Eagles will probably put the franchise tag on him in hopes of trading him to another team. We don't know that for sure, but it will likely happen according to reports. So, Jeff, we want to take a look at the possible scenarios, the possible teams that Nick Foles could end up at the end of the day. Obviously each team, we're not really sure what their strategy will be if some of these teams are looking to draft a quarterback, trade for one. We don't really know, but what we're interested in is just the fantasy value. Just based on the situation, where might Nick Foles have the most fantasy football success next year, and maybe which city or cities we might want to avoid in terms of his fantasy football outlook next season. So I'll start off. We'll go through each city, and then at the end we'll recap and give our recommendations if we think it's good or bad. Okay?
Okay.
All right. First one is the New York Giants. Obviously, they're a division team, same division as the Eagles, so the likeliness of him going there might not be great. But if Nick Foles went to the New York Giants, could you see, how high do you think you could possibly see him going in fantasy drafts?
You see, I'm hesitant if he goes there because of one reason and one reason only. And you should know this reason. Saquon Barkley.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like they're going to give him the ball more often than Foles will have the ability to pass the ball. And plus, I just think that that's Barkley's team at the moment.
But usually if a running back is that good, it will help the quarterback, right? Because first off, he throws the ball a lot. Barkley catches a lot of passes, first off. Mm-hmm. But second off, if the offense overall is good, it means they're scoring more points, which means the quarterback is just by default going to score more points, right?
Not necessarily. Like, it could be a lot of rushing touchdowns. And the fact of the matter is, when you're facing the Giants, you're going to be blitzing a lot because you're expecting them to run the ball more often than not. So he might not be, if it is a pass play or play action play, he might not get the ball off in time.
But don't fantasy running backs usually have good fantasy quarterbacks with them? I feel like they're usually together. Like, not all the time, but like Jared Goff did really well with Gurley this year. Obviously, Mahomes and Kareem Hunt were spectacular. Le'Veon Bell and Ben Roethlisberger have been good together. Kamara and Drew Brees. It seems like there's more of a correlation between running back being good and quarterback being good rather than running back being good, quarterback being not good, right?
I guess it depends on the team and depends on the coaching and the play and the offensive scheme. But just the fact how good Saquon Barkley is doing, how bad Eli Manning did. I'm not saying like Foles is Eli Manning in any sense of the term, but I'm hesitant because of the fact of how good Barkley is and how often he will be used in not in the favor of Foles. Foles will be more of a manager quarterback, if anything, if he goes to the Giants. He'll just be there to hike the ball and give it to Barkley in any way, shape, or form.
Man, I feel like Foles would do great in New York, to be honest with you. I mean, obviously they need to fix their protection, but you got Odell Beckham, you got Evan Ingram, you got two amazing pass-catching, touchdown-catching receivers, plus Barkley, who you throw the ball out to. I mean, Eli Manning got some fantasy points last year just by tossing the ball to Barkley, letting him do the rest. I think we definitely are different in our opinions on his value going to the Giants. But let's move on to the next team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Nick Foles, let's say, gets traded there. Jacksonville, obviously, we don't know what they're going to look like next year. Maybe they'll have Fournette, maybe not. But regardless, if you see him going to the Jacksonville Jaguars, can you assess his fantasy value?
Well, with the loss of Leonard Fournette, which is almost a formality now, they don't really have a running game. And so they're going to be passing the ball a lot more in Jacksonville than I believe will be in New York. So that might be a better fit for him, in my opinion, overall. They might not have the talent at wide receiving core, of course not. But when you have more options to pass the ball, I mean, look for example, James Harden has so many points, yet he shoots the ball so many times. So if you throw the ball enough, you will get more points enough to make a progress as your quarterback, in theory.
Mm-hmm. For Jacksonville, I think you would do well there. I think they have decent receivers. I think Jacksonville is a team that a lot of people have written off on their receiving core because they've been inconsistent in the passing game, but I think that falls more on the shoulders of the quarterback rather than the receivers. You got a guy like Dede Westbrook. Dante Moncrief was good for them this season. They've had other players, too, that they're decent guys. It's just the consistency hasn't been there. I think Nick Foles, what he would bring to Jacksonville is a level of consistency. And interestingly enough, I kind of feel like Bortles is very similar to Nick Foles in the good ways, in the ways where you don't have to completely change your offense. Like, they both can move a little bit. They both are about the same size. They both are about the same build. Arm strength is similar. But Nick Foles is just better. But they're similar styles. So Jacksonville wouldn't need to revolutionize their offense or anything like that, is what I'm basically getting to. So
they can keep their offensive scheme, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because sometimes when you change your offense, for example, maybe the pieces don't fit. Maybe you need different wide receivers. Maybe you need different running backs. But I think Foles would be more of a plug and play where they don't have to change everything around him,
Right. It's less expensive to go just for him than anyone else.
Yeah, and easier to predict, right? Easier to be okay, this guy could go into this team and be an obvious substitution, So philosophically, I think they're similar there. How about, we'll go on the next team here. This one's tough to figure out for me. The Washington Redskins. Now, we know Alex Smith's not playing football this year. We hope at some point he's able to resume his NFL career. It doesn't look promising at this point, but, man, all we can do is just hope and pray that he can get healthy and he can get better in that regard to be able to at least make an attempt at coming back. But in the meantime, the Redskins obviously have a quarterback problem. They obviously have a hole there. It would make sense for them to be interested in Nick Foles. Now, they are another divisional team for the Philadelphia Eagles, so it doesn't make much sense for the Eagles to trade him to the Redskins. But let's just say he winds up on the Redskins. What do you think Nick Foles' fantasy value is if he winds up on the Redskins?
How Alex Smith did this season for breaking his leg, he did have some good numbers, so it could lead to a pretty good season for Nick Foles overall, honestly, and this team can maybe go back into a playoff contention and win the division like they were. Looks like they were going to back when they were with Alex Smith.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I think, again, I think he'd make the Redskins a lot better situation. Obviously, they went from Alex Smith to Colt McCoy to Josh Johnson. He'd be a huge upgrade from at least the last two. Alex Smith was doing pretty well. In fact, the Redskins were in first place. But in terms of fantasy value, Alex Smith didn't really have that. So I think Nick Foles would be definitely a more upside play in terms of rostering him in season-long leagues, taking a shot at him. I don't know if it's the best spot for him, as the Redskins have some questions. Will Adrian Peterson be back? Maybe. What is their wide receiving core going to look like next year? Jamison Crowder is obviously a decent player. They have a couple other guys younger guys like Doxson, who aren't necessarily proven, maybe having a tough time staying healthy. I'm not sure about Washington. They are a mystery to me. Okay, let's move on to another team. Now, this team has a quarterback, but maybe they're not feeling comfortable with where they're at, and they could be a team that makes a move for Nick Foles. The Denver Broncos. Now, let's say they move on from Keenum and they go get Foles.
I think it's too soon to move on from Keenum.
But let's just this is hypothetical. It's all hypothetical. If they do this and they go get Nick Foles and they drop Case Keenum, what do you think his fantasy value is if he's on the Broncos?
That's I think he has. If Emmanuel Sanders is there in this hypothetical world, and Philip Lindsay is worked more into the passing game, I think he could be a major threat.
Would you say that he's a top 15 quarterback if he goes to Denver? Emmanuel Sanders. They got a couple other young wide receivers, as we saw.
I would say top. I would say between 15 and 10 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's okay to say, right? That's not ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know as of right now. It's hard to assess Nick Foles' fantasy value.
I do think regardless where he goes, if he's the starter, he's going to be one of the main quarterbacks selected, like top 10 quarterbacks selected, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he is. What do I think he's one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the league? I don't know.
It's all about fantasy value.
Yeah,
right?
and I think it's based off name alone too.
Mm-hmm.
No disrespect. That's how it usually works.
Okay, let's move on to the next team, the Oakland Raiders. Let's say the Oakland Raiders decide they don't want to go young, but they also don't want to stay with Derek Carr, Nick Foles. John Gruden likes veteran quarterbacks, at least he has in the past. So let's just theorize he goes to the Raiders. What do you make of his fantasy value if Foles is on the Raiders next year?
They've got rid of a lot of players, especially Amari Cooper's the big loss.
Jordy Nelson is basically their one guy left. Martavis Bryant's gone.
Jordy Nelson's at the end of his career. He's not what he
Jared
used to
Cook
be.
is also a free agent.
And I don't see him going back to Oakland, to be honest with you.
Yeah, who knows? But he's a good player if he stays.
If he stays there, I think Foles would love that. But
big question mark at running back.
Yeah,
Marshawn Lynch probably not back.
And Doug Martin's a huge question mark also. There's so many doubts about that offense that I think Foles would just get lost. And it's not his fault. It's just, it's Gruden's fault, really.
Yeah, that's a team in a lot of turmoil. They might have
that might be the worst place for him to be completely
But Derek
honest
Carr did have some fantasy value last year. That should be noted.
Granted.
There was a time, at least a cluster of games, where he was putting up some numbers. The offense was putting up points. The Pittsburgh game in particular stands out where they beat the Steelers. That was the loss that really ended the Steelers season, to be honest. But I think they scored 44 points in that game, and Carr had a big game. I think he had 4 touchdowns, something like that. So there is opportunity there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And, it just...
We got 2 more teams on this list.
Okay. But again, I think the Raiders, honestly, between my honest opinion, I think the Raiders would be the worst place for him.
So Cincinnati's next. Cincinnati has Andy Dalton. Maybe they move on, maybe not. We don't know. It's another hypothetical. They could be okay with what they got right now. They could be drafting one, or they could say, hey, Nick Foles, we'd love to have you. What do you think about his value if he's on the Bengals with a new team, a new coach, AJ Green? What are your thoughts?
AJ Green is a big question mark still for me because he's been up and down the last year or so, just injury and just he's getting up there, veteran-wise. But I like it because they're putting in a quarterback's coach there, and I think that quarterback coach would really like to have Foles as his quarterback instead of Andy Dalton.
Mm-hmm.
So it would make sense.
And what's his fantasy value?
Oh, it goes up because of the fact, like I said, quarterback's coach would be he would really work with Foles to get him better than he already is. So I can see this being a high pick, not like one of the first quarterbacks selected, but I can see
top 10.
I can see a top 10 selection because of also his receiving core.
It will be intriguing. I'll give you that.
His receiving core is still pretty. His receiving core will be pretty solid.
Yeah, Terrence Boyd is a good wide receiver. John Ross, still young, super fast. I mean, there is some intrigue there. Definitely a better receiving core than maybe every team on this list, minus 1 or 2. But yeah, I could see Cincinnati being a nice little landing spot for Nick Foles, depending on what else happens in the offseason. We definitely don't know the coaching staff, but we know that it's a guy who's from the Sean McVay system, so we kind of expect more maybe exciting offense just because of the expectations that come with working under Sean McVay. So, okay, last team on the list, all right?
Last team. All right, go for it.
The Miami Dolphins. If the Miami Dolphins come calling and they want Nick Foles, what do you think his value is next year?
My problem with that is the owner has said we're not planning on winning the next few years.
Right.
If
they go get Nick Foles, that might change their philosophy because that would be like a let's try and be good kind of move.
Maybe, but again, you got to look at the team around him if he can do well with that, and it all depends on the coaching staff. Like this, it's a questionable coaching staff too who they hired. To be honest with you. And I don't know. I really think that he's up there, in my opinion, with the Raiders of potential there. I think that's not a good idea, not a good decision on his part for that circumstance. But I could be wrong. He could have a breakout year, but that's a judgment for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this team is probably the hardest to predict. I mean, I don't think any quarterback is going to have much value next year at the Dolphins. Not only were they a team that had a very uneven fantasy output in terms of their skill players, but they hire a defensive coach. There's a lot of uncertainty on the offensive side of the ball. We hear Tannehill's probably getting released. And we'll probably talk about him later on at some point in one of these episodes. But, yeah, that would be bad, in my opinion. All right, Jeff, so we're going to rank these, all right? I want you to rank these worst to best. Okay? Giants, Jacksonville, Washington, Denver, Oakland, Cincinnati, Miami.
Last place for me is Oakland. Then
so even over Miami, you'd have Oakland.
Yeah, then it's Miami.
Okay.
I think Miami has a more talented, younger team overall.
All right, keep going. So you have Giants, Jacksonville, Washington, Denver, and Cincinnati left.
I would put Cincinnati next, then Denver.
Okay, so then you have 3 left. Giants, Jacksonville, Washington.
Then I would put the Giants.
Okay, so then your last 2 are Washington and Jacksonville.
I'm putting Jacksonville then Washington.
So Washington would be the best landing spot for Foles.
I truly believe so. How Alex Smith did last season, and they're not losing anybody from my knowledge is concerned. I think he could do well. He has the the talent of an Alex Smith, if not better, and I think he could do extremely well there because they had all the potential of winning the NFC East in the world before he got injured.
And let me ask you this: if he goes to Oakland or Miami, does he get picked in a season-long fantasy league? And if so,
say that one more time.
If he goes to Oakland or Miami, since they're the worst two spots on your list, do you think he gets picked in a season-long fantasy league? And if so, what area, like what number-ish would you say?
He's gonna be very late.
So would he be like top 15 or top 20?
I would put
a lot of teams in leagues like me. I only really pick one quarterback unless something weird happens where at the end of the draft there's like a decent one out there.
I would put him in the number like 20, if anything.
Okay. And then if he goes to Washington, who you feel would be a really good landing spot?
I would put him in the top 15. I move him up a bit.
Would you move him in the top? Would he be a starter in a 12-team league? Would you pick him as your first quarterback if you were like one of the later ones?
It depends on who my other team, how I set my team up.
Let's say that you have the last. Let's say you're the 12th team to pick a quarterback. Everybody's picked one before you. You got a guy like Foles there. I don't know. Let's see. Trubisky could be there. Darnold could be there.
I would pick Foles over them.
Okay.
I think that's safe. And then I already have my running back. I already have my wide receivers who are going to be my main point makers. And this guy's just going to help out and try to pad out my stats if I need some help in the last couple of games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like everyone knows you should never rely on a quarterback for points anyways, unless it's like even a Patrick Mahomes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Like, I can honestly see a Patrick Mahomes going first 2 rounds in some leagues based off like how insane his stats were.
For me, I think Miami would be the worst spot for him. I know you had Oakland, but I have Oakland the second worst.
So we're basically in the
yeah.
Yeah. We both see them the same way though. That's basically how.
But then
going.
After that, I actually have Jacksonville as the third worst. I think he'll be good for their team, but fantasy value wise, I still think they're going to be a team that's committed to running the football a lot and play, ugly football games. Now, after that, I go Denver. I think Denver.
Yeah. Okay.
Because they do have Emmanuel Sanders, but he did suffer a bad injury.
Okay, what if he's
suffered an Achilles?
What if he's 100% by the beginning of the season? Does that change your mind at all?
Slightly, but I still probably keep him there because
hesitant about re-aggravating
I'm hesitant about Denver's overall process. Like, they have a defensive coach. I like Fangio, but their problem offensively, I don't know.
They've always, after they lost Manning, they've always had a problem offensively. So I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. And then I'd go Cincinnati. No, you know what? I'd go Washington.
Wow, you have Washington that behind.
I'd go Washington, I'd go Cincy, and then I'd have the Giants as
well. Why
the best.
Washington so far back, if I may ask?
Just because they have some uncertainty with Jay Gruden. I don't know what their outlook is.
But if you saw Alex Smith numbers before he got injured, he was doing pretty darn well.
But he
overall.
wasn't fantasy relevant. But he was good in real life. So his numbers were not like he was on the waiver wire in pretty much every fantasy league.
But are you really looking for if it's a season long league? Are you looking for a big time number for your quarterback, or just someone that can give you like 15 points and just keep you in the running and let your running backs and wide receivers do the work?
Yeah, no. I mean, just in terms of fantasy value, I see Washington as a decent spot. Not terrible. I just don't think they're better than Cincinnati, I think, is number 2. And the reason why I say that is because I expect that offense to look a little Sean McVay-ish because of the new head coach and A.J. Green. And I know he's banged up. He gets hurt sometimes. But they have other good receivers, too. Cincinnati might have the best receiving core.
Have you noticed when they lose A.J. Green, they really slump, though, overall?
Well, yeah, but they also have Andy Dalton.
True.
So
Nick Foles, I see what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. A.J. Green's a risk, and he's a big deal, so it is something to think about.
He's always going to be the front point of that offense, so when he's gone, it's going to...
time.
And then their running back, Joe Mixon's not really a receiving back at all.
Maybe they utilize Giovanni Bernard in that regard. I don't know.
But that just leaves him a lot of questions in that circumstance.
But my best one is the Giants, and I know we disagree there. I just think, man, that offense, you got Odell. There's a lot of talent, and I think Nick Foles could definitely work with that talent. I think the run-pass option, fake handoff to Barkley, pulling in the defenders, throwing deep to Odell. I mean, they're going to get some cheap points next year if that happens. It's probably not going to happen because of the division rivalry thing. They're not going to trade within the division, so I don't think it'll happen. But, man, I could see that. I'll tell you this. If Nick Foles is the quarterback of the Giants next year, I would pick him in the top 10 for sure. I'd probably pick him around 8 or 9.
I'm only hesitant because I think Barkley's going to take most of the workload and take away from Foles. That's my only concern.
I understand. I'm actually more concerned about the offensive line, but if the Giants are committed to fixing that and they get Foles, that offense could be deadly, not just for fantasy, but in the NFL. So we should take a break. When we come back, we're going to rank the top 5 fantasy running backs for 2019, the extremely early 2019 top 5 fantasy backs. So I'm giving you a couple minutes to get your list down. But
You can't tell me what to do.
Well, I can't. You're right, but I'm giving you an
opportunity.
I'm giving you the option. Yes. But before we do that, I want to talk about investing and planning for your retirement. It's always best to get advice from the experts. Best-selling author Harry Dent, America's #1 economist, says, "The dark window is open. There is an opportunity to rapidly boost your retirement savings before the greatest stock market crash in American history. But this dark window won't be open for long. You can make 10 times the annual average stock market gain in just a few short months. According to the research of renowned Harvard economist Harry Dent, though, this window could slam shut later this year, and nobody on Wall Street is expecting it. This dark window is something bigger, by far, than anything he's predicted up to this point, and you can make 10 times the annual average stock market gain. Find out more by going to www.harrydentforecast.com. There is a very short time to take advantage of this dark window, so go to www.harrydentforecast.com to learn more."
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back, everyone, to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We're going to do our top 5 running backs for the 2001-9 season. We're going to go from 5 to 1. So who's your number 5? Mark.
Based on some recent news and my maybe outlook of this team changing slightly, I have Christian McCaffrey as number 5.
Oh, really?
Only because it does sound like Cam Newton's shoulder was less messed up than they initially thought. This could definitely change. McCaffrey could fall out of my top 10 if Newton doesn't play. But if Newton plays, McCaffrey's my 5th one.
Mm-hmm. This is my list. Also has, I'm assuming that he's not playing the whole year, Cam Newton. That's why McCaffrey's not in my top 5. Mm-hmm. That's why I was hesitant. I was thinking about it, but I was thinking, if Newton does not play, he can't be in my top 5.
Mm-hmm. So I had Nick Chubb missing my top 5 because of McCaffrey. I had Chubb in at 5, but I switched it.
Well, my number 5 is Alvin Kamara.
Okay.
Because Mark Ingram might be gone, most likely, and he's probably going to get a lot more carries. He's going to be dangerous.
Oh yeah. If let's put it this way, When Ingram wasn't in the lineup earlier this year, Kamara was the number 1 running back by far in the NFL.
Yeah.
Which was insane.
I only put him there because if this is Breeze's last year, I think they're going to throw the ball a lot more to get Breeze like some padded stats because that's what kind of Sean Payton does. He likes to pad some stats.
Yep.
So
all right.
That's why he's number 5 for me.
So he's your 5. My number 4 is Todd Gurley.
Oh, wow. That low, huh? MVP, possibly.
I only
MVP?
have him this low because of how the season ended for Todd Gurley.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
I don't know if he's injured. I think he's injured.
Oh, he's injured. There's no
But
doubt
if
in my
he's
mind.
not injured, that's concerning too. Like, whatever is happening is concerning. Like, whether he's hurt or he fell out of favor with the coaching staff, I don't know. But one thing to remember, Jeff, and I don't know if you caught this, he declined to speak to reporters at his exit interview. Todd Gurley told reporters, I'm not speaking to the media.
After the Super Bowl?
After the Super Bowl, when every other member of the team spoke to the media. That tells me
There's something wrong.
maybe he's not hurt, and it's actually just something going on there.
You have me thinking now. You bring up an excellent
It could be
point.
absolutely nothing. Maybe I'm reading too far into it, but I found that very odd.
I 100% get what you're throwing down, though. I totally get that.
It just made me concerned enough to put him to 4. Still in the top 5, though, you know? Who do you have at number 4?
My number 4 is who you said you left out, and that's Nick Chubb.
Okay.
That dude's a beast on Cleveland. With him and Mayfield together,
I got a good thing going, though,
I
too.
see some magic happen. Especially him in the passing game also clicking. I see magic happening.
I had Chubb in the 5, like I mentioned. I just gave the edge to McCaffrey because of the Newton news, but...
I'm still hesitant about Newton. That's
Yeah.
why he's not in my top 5. But we have basically around the same thing here.
All right, so that's your 4.
Here's your 3. Or should I do my 3?
My 3 is Kamara.
Okay.
A lot of what you said. I mean, Mark Ingram, we don't expect him to be back with the Saints salary cap situation. What Ingram will get on the open market. What I expect the Saints to do is draft a running back or two, like in the middle rounds, to complement Kamara. But I think Kamara will get the most touches he's ever had in his career next year. A lot of it is passing, and you know how good he is as a receiver. Those are huge numbers for running backs. Kamara's number 3 for me.
Yeah. I have Kamara up there, but I was hesitant, like I said, about Drew Brees and how they would use him in his final quote-unquote season. We don't know if that's true or not. So it all depends on Brees' position because Sean Payton will love to give him some extra stats, supposedly. But my number 3 is Ezekiel Elliott.
Yes, okay.
He's in my middle of the pack just because Dallas is so unpredictable. But Elliott is not. So I always think he's always going to be a player that can do well for your fantasy team. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I have Elliott as my number 2, to be honest with you.
So we have him in the same place, roughly.
Yeah, I mean, he's super consistent.
I think we have the same number 1.
We might.
Yeah.
Who do you have at number 2?
Mine's Gurley.
Okay, so, yeah.
I have this because I understand what you said, but if that's all you're overthinking it, which is understandable because that might be everyone's case because we have to overthink in this job. And he's 100% healthy and he plays like he did at the beginning of the season this year. He's definitely my number 2. Because he almost was MVP at one point.
Yeah, for sure. My number 1 is Saquon.
Exactly the same.
It's Saquon Barkley.
I don't think there's any doubt.
And my reasoning is he was already a top 5 running back this year. That was with Eli Manning. If he still has Eli Manning...
Add his terrible offensive line.
If he still has Eli Manning and he still has most of that same offensive line, I think at worst he's in the top 5. I think he's number 5. If they improve that offensive line slightly, if they improve quarterback play slightly, I think he could be number 1. He had over 2,000 yards from scrimmage this year, Jeff.
I know.
Like, that's insane. And you know what? He's so good. You know who he reminds me of? Barry Sanders.
And he's considered a GOAT.
Do you know how Barry Sanders didn't play like behind a great offensive line? You know how Barry Sanders turned a lot of nothings into somethings? That's what I feel like about Barkley.
I see the same exact thing. And with me, I'm the same with Saquon, and mine's number 1.
Can you imagine if this guy had a good offensive line? This guy, Saquon Barkley. Can you imagine if he had...
I can see him breaking Eric Dickerson's record.
Man, he would be
That's
something else.
That's not far off, is it?
No, I don't think so, man.
Yeah.
He's
And
a talent.
The thing is, regardless of even if Eli isn't there and they get that quarterback, I don't care who it is. They're going to ride Barkley through this entire season. He's getting all the carries. He's getting all the looks. He's going to be the first option on their offense. Regardless what happens this offseason, he's going to be the guy they're going to look at throughout this entire season.
Yep. I think I have Barkley at number 1. It might be a little bit higher than others will say right now, but
how he played this season showed me that he has plenty of ability.
I think the Giants are going to – I don't know what they're going to do with their first pick in the draft, honestly. They might go get a quarterback to sit behind Eli, but I think they're going to invest a lot in that offensive line. I really do. I think they'll spend 2 or 3 draft picks in the top 5 rounds on offensive linemen. So if they can do that help them a little bit. It's
all about investing in Barkley. Barkley is your franchise.
They have wide receiver. Yeah, absolutely. They have Odell Beckham. They have Evan Ingram. They have Sterling
But if you
Shepard.
had to pick someone to make your franchise between Odell and Barkley, you're picking Barkley? I'm picking Barkley.
Yeah, Barkley.
Okay, so at least we're on the same page there. And it's just one of those things. Barkley is a generational talent, no question about it, and you got to make him as happy and as best as you can make him. So, like I said, if they draft an offensive lineman in the first round, I would totally get that as well. And so it all based off protecting and making Barkley the best because he's going to help your team win. It's not often a running back's going to carry your team to victory. It's rarely happened. Barry Sanders is a perfect example. But if anyone can do it this season, Saquon Barkley can. No doubt in my mind.
All right. So that's our show for today. Please join us next week. We'll talk about free agency a little bit, best quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, and tight ends that will be available. We'll also probably recap the AAF this weekend and see if any of the action maybe lends itself to some fantasy leagues. We'll see the reaction.
It's definitely going to be interesting. And as
the
always,
reaction by fans will tell us a lot about where
I'm
this thing goes.
I'm assuming the first game's going to get a lot of viewership just out of curiosity. Like that, the XFL when it first started had like 13 million viewers just out of curiosity alone, and then it dropped off. But the first couple of games are definitely going to get a lot of viewership just based off the curiosity of the new league. But as always, I'm Jeff Melanoff. That's Mark Souza. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend, everybody.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.